Tonight on the Game On podcast, Crows continue on their winning ways, but are they a top four contender? Talk about that. And once again, it's all gone pear-shaped for Port Adelaide. Where to next? And AFL signings are huge, but an NBL signing takes the cake. All right, let's do this. Welcome to the Game On podcast. My name's Pete. Once again, Malcolm's joining me in the studio. Mate, how's your week been?
Yeah, not bad, mate. I will say, well, let's get it away from sport. But,
yes.
I did drop my son off at work. He does work at a Woolies.
Yes.
In comes this four-wheel drive, driving into the car park.
Maybe late?
Well, he didn't have a Woolworths outfit on,
okay,
but driving like a freaking rocket.
Yep.
Four-wheel drive mounted the curb in the thing and he smashed straight into a tree.
Right.
And I got to be honest, I was sitting there thinking, do I get out and go over and say, give Craig Steen Crash Repairs a ring?
Yes.
But I said to Craig, I was laughing too much.
Yep.
And that, so yes.
Probably need to have some business cards on hand, mate. You just hand them out as you're going along. We'll leave it under his windscreen wiper. That's
one of the
unbelievable.
most bizarre bits of driving I've ever seen.
Mate, the other good thing about this week is we've had rain. Finally we've had
yes.
some rain. It's been an interesting exercise over the last few days.
Yeah, it was just weird. Monday out and about in the morning, I had a meeting and that. And I did call into Dylan's and I said as I'm walking in that, what's that weird thing above coming out of the sky?
Spot on, mate. Absolutely spot on. All right. Since we've done the weather, we better get on to some sports, mate. Let's get into Around the Grounds.
Around the Grounds.
All right, coming up a little bit later, as we always do, we're going to look at the soccer because there has been some signings and some release of players. And also over in the EPL, there are a couple of teams who have had a huge payday, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The Netball and obviously the SANFL. But let's kick off with the AFL first up. Mate, I think we better get this one out of the way right from the get-go, is Alex Pearce and the tribunal decision. Common sense, I think, has prevailed.
Yeah, I think so. I think there still are football accidents. And just because someone's concussed...
Yes.
Doesn't mean the person should automatically be suspended. So I actually think it's been a common sense decision. And let's be honest, we don't say that too often about the AFL, especially administrative-wise this season.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So that's an interesting one. My other one, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but while we're talking tribunal, is the Baker decision on Peatling. A fine. What are your thoughts on that?
Had to be sent to the tribunal. Yep. Unbelievable decision. Shocking decision by Michael Christian. It was unduly rough player. It was ridiculous. You deserve to get a game for being a dickhead like that.
Yep.
That's what should have happened. Effectively even say, one game, bang, fine. Fine for an AFL player when they're on whatever. Okay, it was weird, but 10 grand fine, whatever, for an AFL player with what, especially a recruit like Baker would be on.
Yep.
West Coast, it's glove box money.
Yep.
No, give the guy a game for being an idiot.
Well, remembering, and we talked about this with the Bailey Smith incident where he shoved a ball in somebody's face, it gets replicated at lower levels, and it's not a good look for the game, is it? Yeah.
It was piss weak that he didn't get a game for that.
Absolutely. A little bit later on, we're going to go through probably mid-season review of some of these teams, and we'll just reel them off and maybe one or two word answers. But let's kick off with Adelaide. Okay, who have they beat? Everyone they are supposed to beat, but they've got a few challenges coming up, haven't they?
They have, they were a bit unlucky, the Gold Coast game.
Yep. Yeah, the Rankin free kick. But they had
Geelong
a few.
here, they were well up. A couple other things went against them that game as well. The ridiculous mark paid to Dempsey when it should have been Shoal. Yeah, just little things, and they didn't react probably that well to that.
Yes. And Collingwood, they had their chances.
Yeah, they certainly had their chances. So I don't think they're far away, but then you watched that game last Thursday night.
Yes.
And I'm watching that and I'm going, realistically, this is still a class above Adelaide. And the same with the Gold Coast Hawthorn game.
Yes, the previous
week.
Yep.
So I think they're still a little bit below. I still think their last few picked aren't quite as good.
Yep.
But then if Thilthorpe takes over a game, Dawson gets on top with Rankin in the middle, then they could beat anyone. So they're not far away, but they probably need their top few to dominate.
Are you convinced they're 4 to 8 now
That's
rather than 6 to 12?
Yeah, but it's a real fine line. Look, they play Sydney away this week. Yes, they should beat Sydney, but Sydney are a bit of a different beast.
Yep.
They then got Hawthorn in Launceston. You've only got to lose a couple, and so you're back amongst the pack again.
Yep.
So I think we're still going a little bit early there, personally.
Yeah. Because I asked this because
I still think they're more lower end of the 8. That's
right. Yep.
in the end, but I hope they do finish higher.
Yep.
But I still think they're a little bit below.
Because the question came for Hawthorn last week and the week before that they've just lost that little bit of edge that has put them back in the pack a little bit, and now they've got 3 tough games coming up. I'm looking at Adelaide going, all right, well, you had a good chance against Collingwood when, personnel-wise they were probably down a little bit. You did what you had to do against a depleted West Coast, and we know that they're troubles as they are. But I think they messed around with it too much in the first couple of quarters. I don't know whether that was a direction to try something different or whether they just got a little bit ahead of themselves.
It was ridiculously windy, and wind is the greatest level in football. It's not so much rain.
Yep.
Wind is the biggest one, and it was just really windy down low, so which is pretty unusual at Adelaide Oval to be like that. So I think it was a little bit different in that way.
I still think they messed around with it a little too much.
Yeah, I didn't think that. I thought it was more just, there were turnovers by both sides.
Yep.
Which you're thinking, come on, hit the body there.
Yeah.
But then
conditions don't agree to
in that regard. So, I still query to the coaching wise, like the Fremantle game especially, where they weren't anywhere near tight enough on Sarong and Brayshaw.
And we know that what their statistics
say that if you keep Sarong and Brayshaw down, how much they fall away. Mm-hmm. Well, it's similar this week in terms of it's Heaney and Warner. If they can block those two out, they don't dominate.
Yep.
Sydney's list does fall away.
Yes.
Adelaide should win.
Yep.
So it's really up to them this week. It'll be.
Is it a case of our system versus their system? Is it? And is that a danger?
I think it is. I think it's still a bit pig-headed. I'd love them to work on developing a lockdown player, or even a Michael Annie to play in there and run off the guy as well, and use his footy smarts.
Would you send someone like a Sid Draper or a Berry to not only play on them as a little bit of a shutdown, but just follow them around and learn off of them?
I think probably Draper's not physically strong enough for either of those two yet. Right. I think Berry would be a chance in that regard.
Ben Keys is probably your number one
and that's
choice,
why I'd still use Keys far more in that way.
Yep.
And especially, for mine, it was just so dumb that Keys didn't go automatically to Rosie in the showdown. It was just so bloody obvious, and it was almost pig-headed that he didn't go to him.
Yep.
So I'm not confident in the Adelaide coaching panel, and truly.
Okay.
And I don't hold back on that.
Well, you've led me into the next point, which is I like what I see from Matty Nix on the point of view that he wasn't satisfied with what happened on Saturday. You could almost see that in his voice and what he was saying. I think that's the next evolution of his coaching, isn't it? Because he's been the, put your arms around, cuddle up and build those relationships. Now he's demanding more, and he's demanding more of this team, isn't he?
Yeah, it's always hard. You don't really know what goes on internally there. So someone can quite often be regarded as the cuddly thing, and yet, wow, like in terms of...
Yeah, but he's had to build them from a long way back.
He's had to start from a long way back.
Yep.
But, people wouldn't be aware that... Anyway, Nathan Bassett's as good as anyone at peeling paint off the walls in a spray.
Absolutely.
But also building guys up, and he's as good at... Certainly, Nathan Bassett's a mile in front of anything we've had at Norwood with junior development wise.
Ever?
Oh well,
you're going
forever,
a long
way
way back. Yeah. Did you like what you heard from Matty Nix in that he sort of was demanding that they should have taken this game apart and really?
Yeah, I didn't mind that.
It didn't quite work the way he wanted.
Yep.
I think that's part of his next evolution. If you're talking about you want an all-rounded coach. And look, you can't clip him all the time, But every now and then you just need a little reminder. And yes, they were playing West Coast. We all know what West Coast's problems are. But he still was demanding, and I think that's a good sign of not only a good team but a good coach.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
Let's have a look. The team looked a little bit different without Walker. Freed up Pedler and Berry a little bit. Did you like it?
Yeah, I just think it's so hard to judge against West Coast too. Let's also remember that, what did Tex have those games where he kicked
19 goals in 2 games.
Yep. There. So, there I'm sure he would have licked his lips a bit. And it was also a little bit of a worry that Fogarty did nothing. Fogarty still needs Walker big time still. So that's still a bit of a worry.
Yep. But did you think their structure looked a little bit better without him? Or balance, I should say. That's probably the wrong word, structure. Balance?
I don't think.
Or was it horses for courses?
I think it's horses for courses. And I don't think Walker's the problem in terms of being run off and all that. He had the most number of tackles for Adelaide against Port.
Yep.
We were there that night. I didn't realise that till I looked later and thought, shit.
Yep.
Walker's had 8 tackles and that.
Well,
so that's my beat.
I thought Walker was gassed, but at the same time, his forward craft, I think, was actually quite good. So when you add those two together, he's still got a lot of value.
Yeah. I just want to see Adelaide work a bit harder. I want to see Keys, Neil Bullen, Rochelle Pedler. I want to see them lock the ball in a bit more and that side of things.
Yep.
So
could that be the difference between, say, bottom of the 8 and the middle of the 8?
Definitely.
Yeah, so bit of homework for those guys to step up.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yep.
But,
did you like the fact that Berry started on the ground rather than subbing again?
You can't go sub too many times, So it was good that he's got a full game, and now at least they've got a decision to be made. Now, if he'd been sub again that game, well, then he misses out this week. So at least now he's been given a chance.
Absolutely.
He played well, so it'll be interesting to see what they do this week.
Did you think the decision to rest Walker in the end was the right decision?
Yes. Yep.
He certainly needed it, but where does that leave him this week? It's a hard thing to get going again after a week off, or is it a finite training regime these days that would probably have him somewhere near
and then
it?
hopefully he's running more on top of the ground again. Look, he looked a bit lethargic.
Yep.
Not quite moving as well. So hopefully hopefully his back's okay and he comes in this week on the SCG and plays well. So I'm sure I think it'll be
play well.
Walker in, and I reckon Zach Taylor might miss out.
Okay. Well, there you go. Early call there. We are obviously recording a touch earlier. All right, mate. I have to mention the ruck. What did you think of Riley O'Brien's game?
He does dominate against West Coast.
Yep.
So let's be fair there. West Coast ruck are probably the worst in the comp.
Yep.
Now, he played very well against Briggs earlier this year. He beat Briggs convincingly and was a big part of the win against GWS.
Yes.
And then he was shithouse against Freo the next week. So
he's
got a big test against Grundy this week.
Yep. Do you think Grundy's lost a step or two over the journey in the last, say, 6 months?
Well, I thought he actually had a reasonable duel
with Gawn
on the weekend. What I did see of that game, I saw a bit of that game at the Queen's Head.
Yes.
And that side of things. And Grundy had played well the week before against Carlton. He played well, and admittedly DeConing wasn't playing that night.
Yep.
And it was Pitternet, but he did play very well against Carlton. So he still seems to be moving all right. So it's a big test for O'Brien this week.
Absolutely. Hey, question without notice. Adelaide, I suppose for some of their recruiting over the last 3 or 4 years, they maybe dodged a couple of bullets with a couple of players. Do you think Grundy is maybe one of them?
Well, you just don't know. It's going to be what they had to give up to get him. So it's always really hard in that way, you know.
Because, I mean, you look at it, how good he's been over the journey, but over the last couple of years, hasn't just been as sharp as he normally has been or had been.
Yeah, and then the other one too that, let's remember, Adelaide did call out Hugo Hagen before, and they got matched, and then so they got Thilthorpe. So, Roo has made a couple of comments there.
Yep.
We're thinking that, what could have been there. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And then the big one going back a fair while is the Tim English one. They could have had Tim English as part of the Crows. So
that's Don Pike's.
Of course, there's things that are going to happen with that anyway. what do you think as far as Adelaide? We'll do them report card. What do you think as far as their first sort of 11 games?
B plus.
Okay.
If I'm,
Yep.
in there.
They've beaten who they had to beat, and they've been in games with teams that are probably in the same area.
If they'd beaten Collingwood, then they'd probably go to the A. I heard him get an A today, and I thought, no, they don't get an A for mine.
No, and that's why I put it at the top of the show. Who have they sort of beaten yet? And let's keep everything in perspective. All right, let's go down the road to Port Adelaide. Port are in a state of flux, and they really are at the edge of the list cliff. There's some challenges coming up as well, considering they do have the hardest draw in the AFL for the back half of the year.
And they haven't got a first-round draft choice at the end of the year. So whoever's got their first-round draft choice, I can't remember now. I have to look that up.
Yep, will be licking their lips.
Yeah, because they're going to have a top 4 draft choice the way it's looking. So
and then you've got Bergman maybe leaving. You've got Butters maybe leaving.
Yeah, and just they just had too many injuries on the weekend beforehand. You just totally expected that Freo will run away pretty easily here. And, they certainly competed. They had enough of the ball. They had more inside 50s, which is a bit of a damning stat when you end up getting annihilated still.
We'll talk about Carlton in a minute. Carlton are in the same boat.
Yeah.
Absolutely in the same boat. It's, their one wood, unfortunately, this year has been taken away from them with all the injuries that they have got, and it's certainly paid the price, but they're not in... They're not in the boat alone at the moment. Essendon are in the same sort of.
Oh, look, Essendon's performance with their injuries they've had has been quite incredible.
Yep.
Rap that young Clark played well. I'd said when I commentated those games. Yeah, thanks, it's SANFL now.
Yes.
Competent fools. That I rated him highly and called him. I said I reckon he'll go and he's done. Rap his first game, and he brilliant interview after the game with his dad, and that was hilarious. So that was fantastic.
Absolutely. We'll talk about Essendon in a minute as well. Let's stay with Port Adelaide. Look, let's address the white elephant in the room, and that is the Hinkley. What do they have to gain by keeping him, and what do they have to gain by Josh Carr taking over now? Let's flush this one out.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either that it works either way.
That's what I'm saying. This is what I'm asking.
If I was Josh Carr at the moment, with their injuries they've got, the fact that one of their best 3 is injured, I wouldn't want the job at the moment. I'd be going, geez.
Did I go too early?
Yeah, I want to hide into nothing. He starts now.
This is why I'm asking.
What's he in for before the end of the year? Say he started this next. It'd be similar.
Yep.
At best, probably 4 and 8 as well. So I don't think he's got anything to gain.
Yep.
So.
And Hinkley's reputation, will it be tarnished, or again, do we sort of give him the pass mark, or the hall pass, so to speak, on the basis that they do have a lot of injuries?
I think he's very, very well respected within football. A lot more than you hear the bloody idiot Port supporters, all that. And let's be real. Port have never had the best list. I think they've overachieved under Hinkley.
I think there's a lot of people that would agree with you.
I rate him really highly. And I'm sure he may end up football manager, football operations manager of the Tasmanian side. Hinkley will end up, if he wants to, he'll get work. He'll be well and truly. There'll be clubs clamouring over him for various roles. He might end up head coaching again. He might want to either.
Well,
so
he's had a pretty big baptism of fire at Port Adelaide over the journey, hasn't he? And that's something that's, that's why I ask whether he does continue on. I just don't quite work out. I can't quite work out where Port Adelaide are at with it at the moment and what they're thinking 6 months, 12 months down the track, because if you're going to put Josh Carr into this, you've almost got to do what Adelaide almost did with Matty Nix and go, all right, well, we're not fully rebuilding, but
close to it.
We are very close to it, and we've got to give him that 6, 7, 8 year chance to get things right.
Well, even Kane Corns had Port Adelaide as one of the clubs he thinks will be really struggling the next 5 years. Now, Kane to say that, I think
shows. And he probably knows a little bit more inside the 4 walls than most. So, Yeah, it is a bit of a worry for Port Adelaide. The buys come at the right time. It's thrown up so much speculation on coaching, but it's really the next 3 games. They've got Melbourne, GWS and Sydney. Doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, Sydney's probably their best chance there just purely on paper, but...
Melbourne have found form and
yeah.
GWS just a reasonably classy side with their guns in. After they lose a couple of their guns, they do fall away as well. So you're right. Maybe Sydney is the challenge, but Sydney will get a few back in that time as well. So it's going to be quite interesting. Has the enjoyment gone from Port Adelaide? Players look bereft of any type of enjoyment or joy.
Kick a few goals and get in front. Suddenly it's there. At the moment, you're getting hammered. Getting a fair bit of the ball. Mm-hmm. The opposition score, and they know at halftime we're not going to win this. So it's a hard one.
I know you know this statistic, and I'm sure some of our listeners have probably heard this statistic as well. But Port Adelaide's, what is it, after halftime or after three-quarter time? It's halftime.
Yeah.
It's 29 points to 316 points. Yeah, that is a massive discrepancy, isn't it?
The 4 games where they've lost, in terms of the Collingwood, Western Bulldogs, Geelong, and Freo over the weekend, it's 45 goals to 8 after half time.
Yep.
So it's a damning stat. That shows the players are just putting their toes and putting the too hard basket.
But how do professional players like that switch off like that as well? Is that coming from the coaching group, or is that coming from internally going, well, doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's just, that's probably for mine the real question mark at the moment. Where's the battle to make? Hang on,
will and desire.
Make this prick in the opposition earn it. It just seems to be.
Yep.
Whatever, yours, and it's bizarre.
I go back to the Pierce Darcy Byrne-Jones incident. There wasn't really too much remonstrating going on, whereas generally what would happen, being Port Adelaide, is that they'd all get around and probably make their presence known to the player that, hey, that's not on, even though it's a footy accident.
No, I think the players in that...
No, I look at the Adelaide incident.
Yeah, but that was dumb by the guy. I reckon that, for mine, the players out of that, they would have got... Even... Pierce has just gone for the ball. He's gone for a mark.
And I get that, but at the same time, that's all happened in real time.
Yeah.
Some players may not have had the benefit of the angle or pulling out. Then you'd expect them to come sort of, not flying in and throwing haymakers. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying getting around your teammates. That was probably the good thing from Adelaide, is that Peatling gets his head pushed into the ground by Baker, and all of a sudden Thilthorpe's going, I'm not standing for this. Then Rankin. Then Curtin, you know what I mean? They all got involved at least. It did cost them
if I was the Adelaide players, I'd be sending Baker the bill.
Yes. Maybe a Baker's dozen in there as well. Yeah. Let's go. Port Adelaide's grade for this first half of the season, mate. Where do you see them at?
D or E?
Yep.
Yeah, a fail, basically.
Yep.
The grades, I got a lot written on my report cards at school.
Yes,
one of those.
One of those ones. Yeah. All right, we'll do some more grading afterwards. Let's talk about some AFL hot topics. Carlton are so far away from it right now. Can they go on a run? What other teams can go on a run in the back half of the season?
Look, Carlton should win their next 4, so suddenly they're back in it.
Yep.
But the bit on the weekend, I did see the whole game. And admittedly, you're watching it on TV, so it's...
Yes, you don't get the 360-degree view, yep.
But I'm just thinking, where's the synergy between Curnow and Mackay? There doesn't seem to be, at any stage, one of them blocking for the other, one of them going deeper, working up. You've really got to query their structure and that. I'm sitting
Is that midfield forward connection that a lot of teams talk about?
But I'm sitting there thinking I would love Craig McRae and the Collingwood coaching panel to be coaching that Carlton side, and how I just wonder how different it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Like Collingwood, admittedly to be at the Collingwood-Sydney game and just be in awe of how well organised they were, and they just automatically seem to know where each player should be on in each each bit of, and look,
Everyone plays their role to their
you know,
best of their
they
ability.
had a lot out this last game,
Yes,
and
we'll talk about that in a minute.
but they still seem to know what they're doing. You know,
I think they had 6 players under 55 games, I think it was.
and you just got to quit. You know, some of Carlton's decisions, like Kennedy getting the lemonades and see you later, and how good he's been with Western Bulldogs. Is Owies a world beater? No, but I tell you what, he's better than what they've got.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, my Idiot of the Week award, Motlop, you've had 4 touches reasonably late in the fourth quarter. Kick a goal and celebrate like you've won Cross Lotto.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck's sake, know. I know it's celebrations. It's the modern era, and it's Indigenous round.
Yes.
I get that, but
read the
hang
room.
on, there's got to be a time. If you've had 30 touches and kicked 3 or 4 and held the side together, but hang on.
Yep.
You've had your 4th touch late in the last quarter and you're celebrating?
Mate, it's painful
No,
painful to hear as a Carlton supporter, mate, unfortunately. Are they cooked? What's their DNA, Carlton?
Well, that's the hard one. You just can't work it out.
Yeah.
You can't work them out.
Yep. I'm not sure even they know.
No, they win their next 4. They're 8-7.
Yeah, but
Suddenly
look who
they're
they're
back
playing,
in it.
though.
I know. Suddenly they're back in it, and
They're teams they should be.
yeah, they will. But yeah, just they were the ones on the weekend. Like again, they had huge amount of inside 50s
And huge amount of contested ball.
and they won all those things. But really, it was the Freo small guy. The GWS small guys in Thomas and Jones.
Just took them apart.
Yeah, were just really. And okay, Toby Green is a gun. Yes, he was probably best on ground, but for mine, it was those two. Those two just gave the zip. Whitfield in the midfield worked instead of at half back.
Yep.
Lear came into the side and played well. So their moves worked, but Carlton had enough of the ball to win the game.
Yeah, and most statistics will tell you that if they do have win those 2 stats, you generally are going to win. I think it's something like 92 or 93%.
And in the end,
time,
GWS reasonably won, reasonably comfortably.
They did.
Towards the end.
Yeah, they did indeed, and that's hard for me to watch and hard for me to see. All right, let's move on. Bevo and Kane go head to head. Media bust ups, mate. What are your thoughts on this?
Bit of theatre. Yeah, look, Bevo's not a fan of Kane. Kane says hello.
Yep.
It was blown out of all proportion. Like there was things being posted on social media. There'd been a all-in fight between the two of them, and
WWE SmackDown.
Yeah,
it's interesting to hear the media who really do drive the game. Getting black banned from change rooms and don't speak to this person and speak to that. Are we back in primary school again?
It's a bit weird. But
It is a little bit.
Kane probably hasn't helped himself. I agree with that. There's some things he said probably haven't been great.
But you got to take it with a pinch of salt, don't you? Because he's there to make it.
And it's clickbait.
Yep.
And look, I actually thought there was a bit of truth with the Sheasel one. And Sheasel wasn't too bad about it himself. So, I think
That's
North Melbourne overreacted a bit as well.
So do you think he sucked them in?
Oh, a little bit. Yeah, I think so.
It's amazing that, isn't it? Let's talk about the ruck trade merry-go-round. Tom de Koning to St Kilda, yay or nay?
I still think he'll end up staying at Carlton.
Okay.
Personally. But you just don't know. Look, apparently what he's been offered, you almost have to take it.
You start the car.
But, don't know. Yep. It'll be interesting.
Rowan Marshall to Adelaide or Geelong?
Oh, I think if he's there, Geelong will be in the equation. Yeah, I would think that. I'd love to get him at Adelaide, but I don't think that'll happen.
Okay. Riley O'Brien to Carlton?
Oh, I think Riley O'Brien will end up staying at Adelaide. They'll offer him another contract.
Okay.
Anywhere else.
And Sean Darcy to Carlton or Geelong? Why not Adelaide?
Oh, if I was Adelaide, I'd make a move for Darcy as well.
This is what they get him for reasonably minimum chips. You can keep O'Brien on your list as your second ruckman.
That's what I'd think. Look,
that's how I'd play it.
It'll be interesting to see the next few weeks now because O'Brien, if O'Brien actually steps up a bit more, they go deep and he plays well, then suddenly it is a little bit different. But for mine, I've said for years, I think Adelaide rucks have been Adelaide's weakness since 2017. So I'm not getting carried away of him dominating against West Coast.
And the forgotten man in all of this is Draper.
Yeah, it's just...
Does he stay at Essendon? Does he come home to Adelaide?
Well, the word is that he was probably going to stay at Essendon, and you've done an Achilles. I know if I was Adelaide, I wouldn't be going full ball for a guy who's done an Achilles.
No, but Darcy's also had some injury problems at Freo.
Yeah, so it depends on passing the medical and how much football Darcy plays before the end of the year. If he breaks down a couple more times before the end of the year, then you'd be going, no thanks.
No.
So,
whereas O'Brien has at least been relatively sound as far as body and mind goes, as far as that goes. So that's going to be an interesting one there. All right, let's talk early Brownlow favourites, mate. It comes to the halfway point and all of a sudden the Brownlow favourites are up there. Jordan Dawson, do you rate him as a chance?
Yes. Yeah, because he'll get 3 votes. There's certain games he will get the 3 votes. So, and he's polled reasonably well before. I think he is a distinct chance. I think Smith and Dacos.
Yes.
I think Bont missed too many. You got to remember, Bont missed the first 6.
6, didn't he?
So, I just think that's too many and that. So he's not going to start getting votes till around, at least around 7.
But does Bailey Smith lose a few because of danger?
Maybe a little bit, but he's really stood out as well. Yep. So, and Dacos just dominates games at times. I can't believe
his kicking efficiency is not all that great. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I just can't work out. Like for mine, Phillips did a good job on him last year, and they took Phillips off in that game as well, and they came from 9 goals down to win it. And then on the weekend, he still got allowed to run around like an unregistered dog after halftime. You've got to question Clark.
We've seen it from time to time, haven't we?
What
about All-Australian? Because at the moment, nobody's got Jordan Dawson in their All-Australian 22-23 after round 10 or 11. Do you think that's crazy?
I'd be amazed if he's not in. I haven't seen any other teams. I'd be amazed. I think he's a certainty at the moment.
Yep. I haven't got him here on the Fox Footy early All-Australian.
Yeah, I find that a bit bizarre. He's leading the Coaches Award, so of course he should be in it.
Absolutely.
For mine, I think at the moment Dawson and Thilthorpe would be...
Well, Thilthorpe's in it.
I think Rankin would be a distinct possibility. So, yeah.
Yep. Haven't got him at the moment, but there's a few names in there I'll share with you a little bit later on, and you can scratch your head just as much as I did. That's why I bring it up.
I hadn't seen any, and for mine, the fact that Dawson's leading the Coaches Award will then...
Well, and he's potentially leading the Brownlow with whatever's going on, and yet it's not in the 22. So, an interesting one, that's for sure. All right, Tasmania dream might be over before it even gets started.
It is a bit of a worry.
Could a merger save the deal? We did talk about it a little bit last week, where the North Melbourne could be the key to opening up this situation.
Yeah, but I don't think that matters. If they're saying that there's got to be a new stadium, I'm not sure how that then changes it.
Yeah, but does that then, like I mentioned last week, in that, say, for the first 2 years or whatever, that they play their 9 or 10 games at down in Tasmania as home games, and then 9 or 10 in Victoria as home games to give the cash boost to be able to help pay for it?
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. I think it's going to be pretty ruthless. It's either you put up or shut up. I don't reckon the AFL will muck around on this one.
Yep.
So we'll wait and see.
Yep. Where does that then leave Tasmania long term? Does that shut the door completely, or does that sort of we revisit it in 4 years' time, 5 years' time?
I don't know. I'd say it'd almost shut the gate because the costs are only going to go up and up and up. They're not going down.
Yep.
So, it's a weird one. You'd think they'd still do it, but if they're saying economically it's too, so who knows?
Well, we thought that about the Adelaide Oval here, that economically it was going to be a little tougher. You build it, they come.
Yeah, it's just...
But we do have a bigger population. I get that, and we have two teams as well.
I think they'll sell it out. Whatever. I think it's only a 25,000 stadium.
26,000.
So that's not that. It's the cost of them saying there's got to be a roof. Now, I don't quite get that because hang on, we've had footy in Tasmania now for how many years? Yep. Well, there's not a roof in those games, so I don't quite get why it's a must. But they're saying yes, it is. So
is that partly because of, say, broadcasting and wanting to play
Possibly.
night games down there, which you don't want to be playing night games in the middle of winter in Tasmania?
yeah, possibly.
You don't even want to play Sunday afternoon games down there.
I know.
Gets quite cold, but yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's one that is certainly going to be worth looking at. We might leave our mergers. I have got them written down here. I might hold them over to next week. There's probably 2 or 3 Victorian teams that are not going to be happy with me as far as the mergers go, but is 16 teams the ideal number for the AFL?
I personally think it is, but you got to remember it's not going to work that way because of the broadcasting rights.
No, but do you want quality as a product or do you want quantity?
Broadcasting rights rule, they want quantity.
Well, then you're going to end up losing people viewing either online or going to games, because we saw on the weekend with the Gold Coast St Kilda game, you only got 13,000 to the game.
Yeah, but provided that's still getting the ratings numbers. Yeah, so I'm not sure.
What if ratings did drop off?
Yeah, then it would become an interesting thing.
Because ratings would go through the roof if you had a better quality of product. Like Business 101, it's either you sell more at a lower price or you sell less at a slightly higher price.
But then
Wouldn't you want to have better quality games every game that you're broadcasting?
Personally, yes, but then we're looking at it with balance. You got to remember when Western Bulldogs looked like they were going to go under the carry on, and the same thing. You still hear Fitzroy people complaining now.
Yep.
Do I think, North Melbourne, I've gone on for ages. They should be the Gold Coast Kangaroos.
Yep.
That's what it should have been. There should have been a side relocated to Greater. I don't think there should be a side in Greater Western Sydney. I understand why they've looked upon it purely as the population on the numbers side of things, but it's not.
Yep.
It's just not working in terms of getting people there. It's a rugby state still.
Should 4 games be played in Greater Western Sydney and 4 games in Monica, in Canberra?
Yeah, I think that's got
that.
Canberra's more an AFL.
Yep.
So Monica's got a 13,000 capacity, and I think they had 12.5 to their last game there. Mm-hmm. So do they do work on Monica and increase Monica's capacity is a possibility?
Well, because the GWS stadium at the showgrounds is unavailable for so many
weeks.
weeks.
Yeah, it's just farcical.
You hear the, I think it was the president or CEO on one of the radio stations today just talking about their travel load at the moment. When you add in, say, gather round and everything else, it's quite high at the moment. And wouldn't it just make sense you've got a stadium just down the road, really, in the scheme of things, and you've probably got a supporter base that would jump off Sydney and probably jump on them if they were there on a regular basis.
I think it makes more of a sense. And as I said, the stat of a GWS youngster on his 23rd game had played at more venues than what Scott Pendlebury
at
is.
420 odd games.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is absolutely crazy. Mate, we probably could have led with this, but I'm sure it's been done to death, but we'll bring it up very, very quickly. The AFL... what is it? Baby that Ross Lyon, the Nepo baby, comments. Is that him putting something back on the agenda, or is that a case of you're trying to deflect from whatever St Kilda are going through at the moment?
Probably a bit of both, And I know St Kilda, all right, but let's also be real. The Victorian sides play home every second week, basically. They don't travel anywhere near as much as an interstate side.
Yep.
So you're whinging on that, and it still hasn't got... okay, St Kilda travel more than Collingwood or Richmond, whatever, but there's still, it's not much more compared to...
No, but
it's certainly nowhere near what...
But the equalisation helps keep someone like a St Kilda alive.
Yeah,
with Collingwood playing in front of 70,000, 80,000. And Richmond playing in front of 70,000, 80,000.
I've got no problem with that, but I just find it amusing that a Victorian side's whinging compared to how much harder it is. Yep. And you got to remember, Gold Coast, they're flying, the distances they're flying and the whole bit. Yep. If a player gets injured, they can't go home and stuff like that. There's a hell of a lot more there. So, yes, Gold Coast area, but then, as I've said, a hell of a lot of those youngsters up there with Gold Coast and Brisbane, that's what got them into footy in the first place with all the young academies and all that. Yep. So they may not have had them playing footy. So I do think it's necessary still on balance-wise.
Where are you at with the next-gen academies?
I still see the point of it and all that. You can argue that
Should every team have?
too many. Yeah, you can argue on that as well. There's points there.
Yep.
In that regard, but I do still see the northern states that hang on, we want those guys playing footy. So, but you can argue, Sydney got Mills and Heaney out of it. See, there's certain arguments against it.
Yeah, but you got local lads.
Yeah, exactly, and you want them playing. So,
Well, just from a PR point of view,
Yeah.
it's like
I can see the both. I just find it amusing Victorian clubs complaining.
No, totally agree. Let's just say we go back to 16 teams. Again, question without notice here. Let's say we go back to 16 teams. Is there a case of having to stop this mid-year draft, which we'll talk about in a minute? Would it be a case of maybe revisiting the old formula of a league team, a reserves team, and an under-18s team, so that way you can draw players within your own?
I'd prefer it that way.
Yeah, within your own zone or your own club, that somebody steps up from reserves into your top side and under-18s into your reserve side.
Yeah.
Does that make more sense going forward for the AFL as a whole, as an industry?
I think it does, but I'm not sure how they rate it on that regard.
Yep.
So
Because let's just say you do have, again, I'm just throwing out 16 teams, even if it's 18 teams, and you do split it up into a conference style where you have 9 and 9 and it's equally shared between non-Victorian clubs and Victorian clubs, so that way there is a home and away element to it. Could you conceivably see a reserves and an under-18s competition working with that format?
Yeah, I think it could.
I think it could. I think it can too.
Yeah.
So maybe going back to the future as far as
possibly,
league reserves and an under-18s comp to be able to draw from. Last one, mate. The mid-season draft is. I know you're not a fan of it. It's obviously playing out, I think, tonight or tomorrow night. Is this something that is going to ruffle a few feathers once again? Because there's some teams like an Essendon that are going to take 4, maybe 5 players. How do they then fit them in when all their players come back from injury? This is my...
suppose, it's just a hard one, though, at the moment, because Essendon have got just a ridiculous number of injuries, especially their tall players.
Yep.
And there's the massive possibility that they may choose someone tomorrow night and he makes his debut the following night for Essendon. I think that's a huge chance to happen.
That's crazy when you think about it. If you had... And going back to my last point, if you had the reserves, league reserves under 18s, you can at least put your 18s in your reserve side to cover you a little bit and then pull some under 18s from a local comp. So you're not compromising that mid-tier or state-based competition. So
it'll be interesting, you as a Carlton man, to see if they pick Jacob Newton from Nord tomorrow night.
Could be a distinct possibility from what I'm hearing, around the traps. So... you probably heard more of Nord's point of view. I've probably heard more from Carlton's point of view. So there you go.
I think it's just a possibility.
Yeah, I think it is indeed. All right, mate, we better take a quick break and we'll quickly talk about last week's games after we come back from the break. Yep. Coming up, we've got Adelaide United, a new head coach. And the SANFL once again back playing after the state game. And the Adelaide Thunderbirds back on the winner's circle.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
Looking to buy or sell your home anywhere in Adelaide, from the hills to the sea? Meet Gary KRIEVS, your dedicated local agent from OUWENS CASSERLY Real Estate. Unparalleled knowledge of Adelaide's housing market and a commitment to exceptional service, Gary ensures a smooth and stress-free experience for all your real estate needs. Trust the expert, trust Gary KRIEVS at OUWENS CASSERLY Real Estate. Your next dream home awaits. Contact Gary today on 0422 071 317 or on email garyk@ocre.com.au. And for more listings, please visit owenscasserly.com.au. Make it happen. All right, once again, we thank our sponsors. All right, mate, let's quickly run through the AFL matches from last week. The Geelong Cats taking on the Western Bulldogs, probably game of the round.
Great game.
It was, wasn't it?
Western Bulldogs just kicking for goal was really what cost them. 6 posters. They should really have won that game, but it was a bloody good game. Yet again, an umpiring thing like Dempsey marked the ball in someone's lounge room there.
Yep.
Shocking decision by the boundary umpire. Straddle the line where someone said he was perfectly positioned. Bullshit.
Not for the line,
no
for the
way
post.
It was.
Yep.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yep. Essendon getting up over Richmond.
Did what they had to do.
Yep.
And again there with Richmond, look, I would have looked at that game and gone, I reckon we're a chance in that game. I'm surprised they didn't rest KRIEVS earlier on to play in that. He played in that game. I reckon that makes it a bit different. And, we'll never know on what they did with Bolter if they'd looked at the long-term bit instead of a one game against Gold Coast. He probably plays and makes it, that's a different result as well.
Yep.
Possibly.
Carlton going down to GWS, which we talked about a little bit earlier. No real surprises there. Hawthorn didn't quite get their own way with it, and Brisbane are just flexing their muscles a little bit, aren't they?
Brisbane were good.
And Charlie was back too.
Yeah, 3 goals in 3 minutes. Yep. They were just a bit too clean. Hawthorn's, at the start of the year, their kicking, we're all going, geez, this is they're elite kicking side.
Yep.
All of a sudden, it seems to have lost them. Mm-hmm. Sicily's struggling, no doubt about that.
Would you drop him? Oh, sorry, not drop him. Would you give him a rest?
I would give him a rest. The word, there's rumours around that he's carrying a groin injury and that. And look, there was a couple of clips showed, and he was chasing as well as you or me, mate, with our backs. Yep. And I'm sitting there thinking,
he can't push off, can he?
No, Jared Healy was the one, and let's remember, Jared Healy's a pretty well qualified physio as well, and he said straight off, that's groin injury. The way he's not pushing there is a groin injury. So.
Maybe a rest on the cards. North Melbourne, probably their best chance to beat Collingwood, but unfortunately fortunately for Collingwood, they got up by 45 points. Is this a damning stat, I suppose, for North Melbourne, considering the talent that they've got?
Yeah.
And Collingwood, obviously, with injuries.
It was a bit disappointing. Like, they'd been good to half time. I admit I spent Saturday at the Arkabar and watched all 3 games. I left at half time of that game. And at half time I thought, this will go down. This looks like it should go down to the wire.
Yep.
And then obviously following it, getting home, and they just bolted away. And it was disappointing. And as I said, I just don't work out the lack of tactics on Nick Dacos, and Josh had 30 odd as well. Look, I think let's remember Ned Long got the flick by Hawthorn, and he has been sensational for Collingwood.
Has he ever?
Where he fitted in, where you got to remember that at that stage, he's the bull, he's the inside midfielder. Will Day was going to be that one. Newcomb to a similar sort of thing as well. Newcomb's probably a little bit more around. And he just fits in like a glove at Collingwood at the moment. And of course, he can feed it out to the Dacoses, etc. And
would you say him and Dan Houston were probably 2 very targeted recruits that helped them get where they need to get?
I think Houston was more targeted. I think Long is
fell
even
into
better.
their lap.
And a pleasant surprise. He's done far better. Like, they were hoping for a guy, probably give him a little bit of depth and play a few games, like an Oleg Markov and along those lines. But he's been huge. He's been a key player.
At Bunnings, standing in line to get a snag, apparently, or pretty close to it. We've already talked about the Port Adelaide Freo game and the Adelaide West Coast game, but Melbourne have turned things around in the last 4 or 5 weeks. Huge win by 53 points over a depleted Sydney Swans. That's probably the best word, depleted.
You wonder, though, how their season, Melbourne's start of the season, may have been different if Aussie Pickett hadn't been a bloody idiot at the end of last season and get himself suspended.
Yep.
He plays round 1. They probably beat GWS.
And it gets
so it just changes everything.
Yep. And St Kilda, with all the comments that are flying around. But the Gold Coast Suns, are they the real deal?
Look, in some ways it was funny because at halftime you think, well, the Gold Coast should pull clear and win this. And then St Kilda dominated the third quarter but kicked 1-6. And, geez, they missed some sitters.
Yep.
So it could have been at 3/4 time level, and I reckon Gold Coast would have been panicking. You imagine Hardwick, bloody, Marvel again and all that. So they did get a bit of a monkey off their back. They didn't probably perform as well as they would have liked, but they did get a bit of a monkey off their back at least.
All right, let's go through this week's tips, but also at the same time, let me give you. I'll give you the opportunity to give you a report card. Brisbane Lions v Essendon. Brisbane first.
Brisbane B.
Essendon.
Injuries-wise, I'll give them with what they've managed to do, I'll give them a B, but probably you've got to look upon a little bit more overall. C.
And Brisbane, obviously, to win that game. Collingwood v Hawthorn. Tip first.
Collingwood.
And
A. Hawthorn. B minus.
Yep. I'm going to go Collingwood A. Hawthorn. I'm going to go B. Gold Coast Suns v Fremantle. Tip.
Yeah, now Pearce is back probably helps there, but I'll because it's up there, I'll go Gold Coast.
Yep, and a report card for Gold Coast and Freo?
B+. With the talent Freo's got overall, C, but they're maybe building.
I agree on both of those. I can't make a point for anything else. GWS v Richmond.
GWS?
Yep.
C+.
Yep.
I reckon they've underachieved a bit. Look, I think Richmond I thought Richmond wouldn't win a game. So, I think the fact they've won 3 games have been competitive a bit, way better than I thought.
Yep.
So in that way, I'd give them a B, but you'd probably give them a C overall, purely on the numbers.
I'm giving them a C+, and I'm giving the Giants a C based upon what they're doing. All right, Sydney v Adelaide.
Sydney D. They've been pretty disappointing.
Yep.
I'll go Adelaide as well.
Yep, and their report card. Oh, no, we did that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, we did a bit earlier. So B+.
Melbourne v St Kilda.
Melbourne. The start of the year at D, and then the last few weeks have probably B+. So
funny how it changes.
C.
C, as well. And St Kilda.
Oh, C to D.
Yeah, I'm probably more in the D. West Coast.
Yeah, E. D to E.
I'm going to go F on that one there.
Yeah, just a fail.
I just think they've...
I saw a lot of those.
Yep. And Geelong?
Geelong, I'll go probably a B at the moment, but they'll end up an A with their draw to come.
It opens up for them beautifully, doesn't
massively.
it? We've already talked Carlton. We've sort of give them a very low C, maybe even on the D. North Melbourne, I think they're a D as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they've been a bit... I would have thought they might have won a couple more by now. And just being a bit more competitive in some games as well.
Port Adelaide, we did a little bit earlier on there. And the Western Bulldogs is the last one, mate. Where do you see them? Considering I thought they would struggle this year.
Considering their injuries too, I'll go B. And I still think them at their best are still... I think they're the best side to watch.
Yep.
So...
Yeah, they don't leave anything to the imagination, do they?
Get Darcy to come back in. Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe Treloar.
Yes.
Although you wouldn't back his calf, in a...
No, but the old man's injury, isn't it? Anyway, all right, let's leave the AFL there. We've almost covered a whole episode just on the AFL because there was a lot of topics.
We better scoot through.
We better fly through this. Adelaide United have appointed a well-credentialed coach. Is it now going to be the team's mantra of youth and development? And they're in good hands.
Well, that is the mantra at Adelaide because that's the way they survive because they've got to build players up. And that's what it is.
And then on-sell them to obviously...
It's exactly the same as a QPR supporter, so it's very similar.
Yes. So we wish Ayrton and Rowley, obviously, I'll get that one right by the start of the season. Wish him the best, obviously, with setting it up. Sutherland earned a big payday by winning a playoff game. It's worth $400 million.
It's huge. And yet again, so it's Sheffield United now.
Yep.
0 for 10 at games at Wembley. They just cannot win the playoffs and how they've failed over the years. And I thought they'd beat Sunderland, and
because this was a playoff game, wasn't it? It's totally different to promotion and relegation.
Yeah.
This is a
playoff. It's just a way the top 2 go up, and then the 3, 4, 5, and 6 compete.
with
it's the winners there of that one go to the playoff final.
And play the third last team?
No,
the
so
last
it's
team?
3 plays 6, 4 plays 5.
That's it.
Then the winners then play in the final. And a shocking error. Sheffield United had the ball.
Yep.
A pass you and I would have been proud of in terms of horrendous error.
Yes.
Goes down and Sunderland scored the winner basically just about the last minute.
On the death, that's exactly right. But a big payday. It's one of the
huge.
biggest paydays in sport. All right, let's talk SANFL very quickly. Sturt are undefeated so far. Congratulations to them.
Yeah.
But the top 5 is basically sorted out now with everyone jockeying for positions.
Yeah.
Can Sturt keep it going?
Yeah. A couple of very happy Sturt supporters I caught up with at the Arkabar.
Yes, well, that would be their local.
Yes, yeah, they sponsor Sturt as well and that. Yeah, so they're up and about. Might have helped me book-wise there, so that was okay.
Happy days.
I think Sturt, Glenelg and Adelaide for mine are the best 3. Look,
Central's
Central's
going all right.
Good. They're a bit just too big for Nord a little bit.
Yep.
And look, in that game though, 60-odd free kicks paid. It was at one stage, and I mucked around with James Gowan, said, the players should just walk off and let them blow the whistle amongst themselves.
Yep.
It was shit house. It was just so over umpired.
It's hard to watch when it's like that at the AFL level, let alone at the SANFL level. We'll leave our ratings for the SANFL, I think, till next week because we are running out of time.
Yep.
Let's move on to netball. The Thunderbirds are go once again. Been a bit of a checkered start to the season and trying to find consistency.
Yeah, there's a lack of consistency. So hopefully they'll build into it, still be around the mark when it counts. But there's a bit of lack of consistency.
Top of the table clash against the Sydney Swifts this week, so
big game.
should be interesting there. I think they're doing well. They sell out games a bit like the basketball here in SA. I think they do it just as well as the basketball, and I think there's some other leagues that could probably take notice. And I think part of that is a lot of their games are not being played when anything else is sort of booked in from a local club point of view. I know it's a little harder with football and bits and pieces like that, but I think that's important for the growth, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I just think the local SANFL clubs should be doing far more with their community clubs. That's how I've always felt.
Yep. Totally agree with you, mate. All right, let's scoot off to another quick break. Let's have a look at what's coming up. But John Cunningham Part 2, we did have some technical issues last week, but we've sorted that out. We'll play it this week. And Keith Thomas Part 2 on Monday.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
Sport. We love it and we live it here at INTERSPORT. We are the heart of sport in our local communities. Family owned and operated, supporting local clubs and the community. INTERSPORT has all the latest products from major brands like Nike, Asics and New Balance at the best prices. Come visit us in store and see why we're your trusted sports experts. INTERSPORT, the heart of sport.
Flashbacks.
He was the star of South Australia, a local boy who turned his back on the WAFL. Forget the big stage where most stars from interstate would strut. Barry Robran chose to stay home, to play footy with his brother, to help North Adelaide to 2 flags. This shy and unassuming boy from Whyalla made the Sunday paper headlines in his league debut game. He impressed all with an incredible display of football genius. Along the way, this graceful champion, with the high marks and the silky skills, won 7 straight club championships, including one in his first senior season. He won the Magarey Medal, South Australia's fairest and most brilliant, in only his 2nd year, after almost snatching it in his debut season. Nobody was in any doubt that he could play. By the time Robert retired, he had won whatever there was to win. He had toured the world as part of an all-stars team. It was a star of state of origin football. The sweetest of all, he helped North Adelaide beat AFL powerhouse CASSERLY to the 1972 Club Championship of Australia. The Blues were in their pomp as the reigning premiers of the VFL when they ran into an inspired Robin in full flight. Australian football legend Alex Jesselenko was moved to applaud the Roosters centre-back's play on more than one occasion. And commentator Lou Richards was equally impressed. He dubbed Robin the new king of football. Nobody disagreed. The King's legend lives on.
Extra time. Big finish.
All right, mate. Some magnificent memories there of Barry Robin, and you just forget how good he was as a footballer. Yeah,
he's the best player I've seen, and look, he was just unbelievable.
Yep. Can't say any more, mate. I didn't see him during his heyday, but I can imagine it was absolutely fantastic. All right, extra time, big finish. We're going to roll through this really quickly today. Let's start off with the NRL State of Origin this week. We always get excited for this event. Who are you picking and by how much? Because I actually got the soccer right last week.
Yes, I will give you that. Yes,
I got my timing wrong with it, but I still got
result.
the 1-0.
Yeah, you got the right result.
Yep.
Look, I'll go New South Wales, but it's been hard to follow. There were so many injuries with both sides. It's been hard to keep up with in that regard.
Yep. I'm going to go Queensland as per usual, but I think in a real tight, hard tussle as it always is. All right, mate, let's move on to the French Open tennis. French Open begins, obviously, over in Paris there. Young Australian, young lady wins a warm-up event and improves her rankings, which I did look up actually just in the break there. About 25 odd spots to get to number 53 in the world.
Unfortunately lost in the first round to the fellow Aussie, to Vanovic.
Yes, Toblanovic, yep.
Trying to think of what the name was.
Maya Joint.
Joint, yeah, that's right.
Maya Joint. So
lots of possible nicknames there.
Absolutely. How do we see Alex de Minaur going?
Get through to the fourth round, the quarter, whatever, around there again. Look, we just hope.
Yep.
We just keep hoping that he can go that bit further.
Yep.
So we'll just wait and see.
So we'll see how we go, and we'll report back on that next week. But my other big one from from the French Open point of view is that a legend was honoured. Yeah. Having the four best players on court honouring his achievement was just special, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really funny too, where his young boy went, well, we're going out to play now? And so enough of that crap, Dad. Come on, let's get out of here.
Exactly right.
And Federer obviously had spent a bit of time with him, so he wanted to be with Federer, so it was quite amusing.
Yep. Yeah. And it's funny that rivalry is actually off the court is actually not even non-existent. They're just
with those
with
guys.
Each other. Exactly right. Yep. Could we see late charge or is Wimbledon sort of Alex's best chance?
Well, you'd think Clay would suit him with his
grinding,
with the grind, get it back over the court, make the opposition hit the winner. So you can only hope in that way. So but because I would have thought grass didn't quite have the weapons. So it's a wait and see.
It is indeed. All right, mate. Quick, good, the bad, the ugly for this week in sport, mate.
I think the good was just the class of game in terms of AFL wise of the Thursday night. Yep. I thought it was a great game to watch. Had everything.
Yep.
The theatre beforehand. So I thought that was great. For mine, the disappointing one, I'm gonna have a crack at Motlop for carrying on like a pork chop when you haven't had the ball.
Yep.
And I also thought it was pretty bloody average by Baker. That's the dumbest thing we've seen in footy for a while.
Yep, and it didn't get punished.
He should have got a games.
Yep. My good and bad and probably ugly all roll into one here. The good is Spurs getting up there in the Europa League. That's it. I was going to say European League. My bad is the way that the club has actually probably treated Ange Postecoglou, which then leads into my ugly, is that he could potentially not be in a job at Spurs next year.
Yeah. Look,
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, but they do judge where you finish in
Premier League.
In the Premier League, and that's where Here's a chance to get the flip. And over there, you got to remember, they change managers like you have hot dinners over there. Clubs struggle and go through 4 in a season.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just
He
ridiculous.
had 11 wins. 5 wins. 11 won, 5 draws, and 20 losses.
Yeah, they finished.
But look at the injuries, though.
Yeah, I know, injury-wise, but they finished the spot above relegation.
Yep.
So
and only one spot below Manchester United.
Yeah.
Come on.
So, yeah, I think United guy will go.
Yep.
I reckon you can. That's a certainty.
Put your bottom dollar.
Yeah, I thought he would have gone by now.
Congratulations to Liverpool, obviously top of the table and celebrating it as well. All right, mate, we better wrap things up. As per usual, like, rate, subscribe. We're up to 153, I think I last checked, on our YouTube subscribers. So we're starting to gain a bit of traction there. We're up to about 26,000 on our normal podcast providers, Apple, Spotify and all that. So we've got some really good numbers there. So until next week, we promise to do better, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, mate.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at SportscastSA. We'll see you next time on Game On.